Some violence broke out at a Trump rally in San Jose at the end of last week. Let's watch.
Come here.
Looks like you're good. So
What's fine?
Yeah, you should be good.
You didn't say anything to anybody? You were just walking out, or what?
I was walking out with our Trump sign. They grabbed my Trump sign and started following me, saying I was like a racist.
You said you're what?
Yeah.
So you literally didn't say anything to provoke them at all?
I was just like, yeah, Trump.
So this is one of those instances where it becomes sadly obvious to me that many people who are anti-Trump don't understand free speech and free expression as much as Trump doesn't understand free speech and free expression. So Donald Trump sued Bill Maher because Bill Maher made a joke about how he looks like an orangutan. He also sued The Onion for a satire article. So this is a guy who is the PC police. This is a guy who doesn't understand free speech and free expression. He literally said, if I get elected, we're going to open up the libel laws so we can crack down on the press if they write these dishonest stories. Right, Donald. It's just anybody who would disagree with you, you would crack down like you're Erdogan. You're America's Erdogan. So he doesn't understand free speech and free expression, but these people do not either. So let me educate these so-called liberals on America. America is a place where we had a Supreme Court case where the KKK marched through a town called Skokie, a town that was a largely minority town. I'm not sure if it was predominantly Jewish or predominantly African-American, but the KKK said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a peaceful rally through the center of this town. Now, who defended the KKK in that case? I hope you're sitting down. The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. And they said very clearly, look, I can't stand these guys. These guys are terrible. They're a group that does not represent us in any way, shape, or form. But they have a right to express horrific opinions. You could be as racist, as xenophobic, as bigoted as you want. And a true progressive, a true liberal says, I do not agree with what you're saying, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. So that's America. America is a place where we hear all opinions, no matter how grotesque. You're allowed to deny the fucking Holocaust. That's illegal in some places in Europe. You're allowed to deny the Holocaust in the U.S., and guess what? We're right to allow people to do that. So when you make the argument, oh my God, Donald Trump is a fascist, Donald Trump is a horrible person, look at what he's saying. He's saying ban all Muslims, he's saying kick out over 11 million undocumented immigrants, oh my God, that's so horrible. Yeah, I agree with you. All that is true. So now as a result of this, I'm going to throw eggs at his supporters, and I'm going to punch people, sucker punch people, and they're going to bleed, and I'm going to attack Trump supporters. No. Now you're the asshole. You're the bad guy. You're the person that's wrong. Look, the whole idea, man, why the fuck do you think I became a liberal, I became a progressive, is that these are the people who are supposed to be principled and are supposed to be consistent. They're the people who say, no, I don't agree with violence. So that means I don't agree with violence. The only reservation I have for that is self-defense. Does it look like that poor woman who got eggs thrown at her, like she was on the verge of punching somebody in the face and somebody threw an egg at her? No, it was an offensive action. The guy was literally walking away and he got sucker punched from the back. You are doing an offensive, violent action there, which means you are the bad guy. You don't get to say, hey, my ideology is so much better because, so as a result of that, I get to do violence in the name of my ideology. That is the biggest contradiction ever. That means you're not a liberal. That means you are not a liberal. This is the oldest trick in the book. I'm so right, I'm so just, I'm so moral that I get to do violence against those bad people. No, but the violence in and of itself is a negative thing. Do you understand that? So look, man, I've always been, and I've argued for this from day one. I'm Team MLK. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. says nonviolent resistance. Again, if we're talking about a war and it's literal self-defense, that's a different thing, and that's the one instance where violence is okay, self-defense. But outside of that context, you keep the moral high ground if you do nonviolent resistance. Because you get to say, I'm not stooping down to their level, and I'm the good guy because my actions prove that I'm the good guy. And then, in the future, you look back and, look at what happened in Alabama. Look at what happened all around the South. You have these innocent, poor black people who are saying, and just liberals in general, who were marching, and they get the dogs, sent to them, and the dogs are biting them. You get the fire hoses turned on them. And now we look back and we go, oh my God, it was so utterly obvious who was right. The people who said we just want equal rights and the people who were willing to get their asses beat for freedom. Well, look at the optics of this. Nobody's going to look back at these events and say, oh, those liberals were right. No, they're going to go, it's funny. I thought Donald Trump was the thug, but then you have people who are beating the shit out of innocent Donald Trump supporters. Well, they look like the thugs. So keep the moral high ground, man. Keep the moral high ground. And look, I get it. So some people have made the argument that you need both in order to get change. So there's the idea of, well, you needed Malcolm X, who was much more militant. To be fair, he said, we only do violence in self-defense. But the group, the Nation of Islam, was much more militant in their approach. And you need MLK. You need that mix so that people can turn to the more reasonable one and say, okay, we give up. What do you want? That's Mandela. Riots in the streets, people going crazy, and then they go, all right, we need some sort of deal. Who do we go to? Mandela. He's the guy who we can talk to. People say you need both. But my concern is, look, you're giving them more sympathy, and rightly so. You're making people go, is Trump the bad one? Look at how the liberals here are acting. So I think you're actually helping them when you act like this. You might think, oh, I'm the bravest and I'm standing up against this. But no, since your actions and your techniques were immoral and unethical on their own merits, well, you just made it so otherwise normal people, good people go, I can't go with you there. You can't throw eggs at innocent women. Now they're on the verge of tears. You can't sucker punch a Trump supporter because you don't like his opinions. So I think you're actually helping them by doing this. And, the argument, if that argument indeed is true, that you need both. You need the violent people, you need the peaceful people in order to get change, to scare the establishment and then to give the establishment somebody to deal with. If that is true, which it may or may not be, I don't know, well then wouldn't the kind of violence that would be done by the more militant protesters, wouldn't that more be, for example, property damage? Because, there's more of a moral argument for that. Like, Noam Chomsky has said in the past that if somebody were to blow up some sort of military weaponry or material and no innocent civilians were killed, but you just blow that up, there's a much better moral argument for that than attacking innocent civilians who happen to have a shitty ideology and follow a thug fascist. So don't become the bad guy. Don't become the devil you're trying to avoid. Because when you start doing violence, there's no end to that. Maybe that slippery slope, that line keeps moving. So, hey, this time it was fine for me to do violence against people who I consider fascists and who have a genuinely bad ideology. Maybe at some point it becomes okay for you to do violence against other liberals who might not agree with you 100%. Once you open that door to violence, where does it end? Who knows? That once you get rid of that bright red moral line, well, then all of a sudden, it's a free-for-all, and it's a matter of opinion. Well, I don't know, censor everybody I disagree with, do violence against people for minor disagreements, and then you're just the bad guy. So keep the moral high ground, do the right thing. I'm in favor of protests, man. Go protest, go drown them out, fucking shout as loud as you want, but it needs to be nonviolent. It needs to be civil disobedience, because that's the only kind, in my view, that always allows us to say every step of the way, we are so obviously right, they are so obviously wrong. Look at what they say and what they do, and look at what we say and do. We're consistent on the side of peace, on the side of freedom. They're not.